My husband, Ethan, and I had been together for 20 years, but he never really fit the usual mold of a husband, the kind we joked about at bachelorette parties. Those comments, let's be honest, were often more than just jokes. They were complaints, sometimes even harsh ones, dressed up as humor. Maybe for us women, it was a kind of group therapy. Sure, we laughed, especially after a few drinks, but deep down, a lot of those remarks carried some truth. But when it came to Ethan, I could never see him in that negative light. He was attractive, so much so that he didn't even look like a typical dad. He took care of himself, stayed fit. More than that, he was responsible, good with money, and made sure our family had everything we needed. He was present, always spending time with me and the kids. He didn't rely on me for much, either. When it came to his clothes, he handled them himself, sorting them, hanging them neatly, and tossing the dirty ones straight into the laundry basket, already separated into whites, colors, and darks. He could even do the laundry himself, though most of the time, I took care of it. He actually enjoyed grocery shopping, something I used to really appreciate, until, at some point, I stopped noticing and just took it for granted. The cars? Always cleaned, serviced, and full of gas. The yard? Kept in perfect shape, just in case the neighbors were watching. And socially, he was friendly with everyone. Our friends, our neighbors, even strangers. He was a great lover, too. But after 20 years, let's be real, there weren't a lot of surprises in the bedroom. And yeah, I'll admit, I was a little bored. Not because he didn't try, though. He did. Toys, long weekends away, lingerie, sometimes for both of us. I used to think it was all his idea, that he was the one pushing for excitement. But looking back, I realize, it was probably more for me. Did that put some pressure on our marriage? Yeah, a little. But no matter what, Ethan was always devoted to me. Even when he got frustrated. Ethan always handled things well, even when I wasn't easy to deal with. He had a way of managing challenges that made him an exceptional financial planner. When the economy took a hit or the market fluctuated, leaving his clients anxious, he never lost his cool. He would listen, let them vent, and patiently guide them toward a more rational perspective. That's why so many of them stuck with him, not just because his strategies worked, but because of the kind of person he was. So how did I get here? How did I end up feeling unsatisfied with my husband, searching for something or someone outside of my marriage? In the end, I made a huge mistake. And now, I feel trapped, like I'm stuck in a cycle I don't know how to break. It's this constant back and forth, a roller coaster of stress and uncertainty. A part of me almost wanted to get caught. If our affair was exposed, at least I wouldn't have to be the one to make the choice. The decision would be out of my hands. Whatever happened next would depend on the fallout. But in the meantime, the affair was slowly draining the life out of my marriage. Little by little, my connection with Ethan faded. The intimacy, the bond we once had, it all started slipping away. I barely noticed at first, but eventually, it was impossible to ignore. Our physical relationship had become distant, our emotional closeness almost non-existent. From my perspective, everything about us had shifted. Did Ethan notice? He had to, right? But did he really know what was happening? Or was he just too committed to his vows, to sticking it out through better or worse, to confront it? Maybe, since there had been no clear proof for so long, he convinced himself nothing was wrong. But surely, he must have felt it. The space between us. The way our relationship, after 20 years, had changed. The subtle shifts in how we spoke to each other, how we went through our routines. The way we still looked like a normal couple in public, put together, steady, but behind closed doors, we were anything but. Everything felt different. Our routines, our habits, the unspoken patterns we used to follow. Saturday night was just another girls' night out, nothing unusual. We decided to check out a new club, but as soon as we walked in, it was obvious we were out of place. This was a spot for 20-somethings, a crowd much younger than us. We stood out, not just because we were older, but because our dresses fit a little tighter, and the way we reacted to the attention we got was different. But that attention? God, it was intoxicating. It felt incredible to be asked to dance, not like at a wedding, where couples our age would sit around, waiting for the one slow song that would finally guilt our husbands into dragging themselves away from the bar for a single, half-hearted dance before disappearing again or sulking at the table. No, this was different. This was loud, exciting, full of energy. And the men? They actually seemed interested in us. Who cared if I was 42 and the guy I was dancing with was 28? What was a little age difference, really? Since we always arrived separately, taking taxis to meet up, we also left on our own. By the end of the night, we had all lost track of each other anyway. The guy I met that night, Harris, was different from the men I was used to. He dressed well, smelled amazing, had a full head of thick hair, and a body that showed he took care of himself. He moved on the dance floor like he was born to be there, and every word out of his mouth felt effortless, perfectly timed. Maybe the alcohol made everything seem more exciting, but honestly, I loved the way he made me laugh. I loved feeling seen. I soaked in his attention, his curiosity, the way he carried himself, like someone desirable. It was such a stark contrast to the predictable rhythm of life with my husband. I remembered something Tyler once told me, how selling financial products wasn't about facts and figures. It was about emotions, about making people feel something. Looking back on that night on the dance floor, I realized that's exactly what it was. It wasn't about logic or reasoning or even attraction. It was all about the feeling. In that moment, I wasn't a wife, a mother, or the woman who kept everything at home running smoothly. None of that mattered. All I felt were emotions, raw, intoxicating, impossible to ignore. Good feelings are persuasive like that. They make you believe that if something feels right, then it must be okay. And God, kissing on that dance floor? It was electric. Even off the floor, in the dim hallway near the restrooms, I found myself against him. Lips brushing, breath shallow. Harris didn't hesitate. He kissed me back with a hunger that sent a thrill through my body, his hands exploring, tracing the curves of my hips. "I've wanted to do this all night," he murmured, his breath warm against my skin. "So have I," I whispered back, my voice thick with anticipation. People walked past, clubgoers wrapped up in their own nights, but in that moment it felt like we were the only two people in the world. Harris pulled me closer, and I let out a soft moan, pressing against him without even thinking. "Oh, damn, yes," I breathed, tilting my head back. He took full advantage, his lips trailing down my neck. A shiver ran through me, my breathing turning uneven. After endless dances and stolen kisses, Harris finally leaned in and asked, "Do you want to get out of here?" His fingers slid beneath the cup of my bra, sending a jolt through me. I didn't hesitate. "Yeah," I said. We left together, heading to his place, a gorgeous house in the prestigious Oak Hollow neighborhood. I won't lie, a few thoughts crossed my mind on the way there. Maybe I should have stopped. Maybe I should have turned back. But our conversation pulled me in, easy and effortless, like I was with someone who actually saw me, someone real, someone open. Everything about it felt right, natural, safe. When we reached his front door, his hand rested gently on the small of my back. I felt a rush of emotions all at once, nerves, excitement, anticipation, and deep down, an undeniable craving. I wanted to touch him. I wanted to feel something I hadn't in a long, long time. For a moment, I felt like I was back in college, young, carefree, completely lost in the moment. But then doubt crept in. Would I still be good enough for him? Would he find me as attractive outside that dimly lit club, now that we were here, in the bright, polished space of his home? But those thoughts vanished the second we touched. We couldn't keep our hands off each other. I glanced around, spotted the staircase, and without hesitation, I pulled him upstairs, assuming that's where the bedroom would be. The moment we stepped inside, I pushed him onto the bed and climbed on top of him. "I've wanted this all night," I murmured, pressing my hips against his, surprising even myself with how bold I was. And yeah, I'll admit it, I moved fast. Maybe because I didn't want to give him a chance to change his mind. Okay, that's a lie. It was because I didn't want to change mine. As I straddled Logan, he reached for me, pulling me closer. A soft gasp escaped my lips as I arched my back, his hands running down my sides, setting my skin on fire. His fingers traced slow, deliberate lines along my spine, finding the clasp of my bra and unhooking it with effortless skill. His lips brushed against my shoulder, trailing kisses that sent a shiver through me. His hands explored, pulling me into him, our bodies moving, sinking into each other. "I've been wanting to do this all night," he whispered against my ear, his breath warm, teasing. "So have I," I whispered back, my voice thick with longing. His hands traveled lower, guiding me as we fell into a steady rhythm. Every movement deepened the intensity between us, the heat, the excitement, the sheer rush of it all. It was intoxicating in a way I hadn't felt in years. My breath caught as the tension built, every sensation sharpening, amplifying, pushing me higher and higher. My fingers gripped his shoulders, nails digging into his skin as my body tensed. A soft moan slipped from my lips, pleasure crashing over me in waves. Logan held me tight, his grip firm, his body pressed against mine as we lost ourselves completely in the moment. As he followed me over the edge, his body trembled against mine. For a moment, we just lay there, catching our breath, wrapped up in the warmth of each other's embrace. "That was incredible," I murmured, my gaze fixed on the ceiling, still lost in the afterglow. "Yeah, it really was," Jake replied, pulling me closer. We stayed like that for a while, tangled together, until the intensity of the moment finally faded into something softer, calmer. How was the sex? Amazing. After spending years with the same man, everything about this was different. And how could it not be? The way he moved, the rhythm, the sequence of it all, it was unfamiliar, exciting. Even the smallest details, the way he touched me, the way he kissed, were new. It was like driving a car I'd been used to for years, only to suddenly find myself behind the wheel of something completely different. Or better yet, like renting a car while on vacation. Everything smelled new, had gadgets I'd never tried, felt strange at first, but thrilling at the same time. Before I knew it, I was in a taxi, heading home at 2 a.m. When I walked in, Tyler was already asleep. I took a quick shower, for obvious reasons, then slipped quietly into bed, setting my alarm early enough to wake up and make coffee, as if nothing had happened. The next morning, when he came downstairs, the scent of fresh coffee filled the kitchen, and I greeted him with a cheerful hum. Yeah, that was definitely out of the ordinary for me. I'm not a morning person. Usually, I'm half asleep and grumbling until I've had at least 2 cups of coffee. But that day, I felt different. And I think Tyler just appreciated having a wife who wasn't grouchy for once. Over the next few days, I caught myself drifting off in thought more than once. Enough that Tyler even asked me if something was wrong. And let me tell you, when you're having an affair, you learn real fast how to think on your feet and come up with good answers. And that's exactly what I did. I had plenty of excuses for why my mind kept wandering, but let's be real, you already know what I was daydreaming about. The pleasure, the way we laughed, the feeling of lying next to my lover, my body still buzzing from that night. I kept replaying it in my head, over and over, reliving every rush of excitement, every surge of endorphins. And the more I thought about it, the more dangerous my thoughts became. I started considering reaching out to Jake, wondering if we could make it happen again. The crazy part? Not once did I stop to think about staying faithful to my vows. It just never crossed my mind. And why would it? The kids were off at college, and Tyler spent most evenings in his home office, holding meetings with clients after dinner. That meant I had plenty of free time. But what about Jake? Would he even want to see me again? Would he make time for me? Should I call him? Or wait and see if he called first? Maybe I needed a second phone. Or at the very least, I should change the lock code on the one I already had. It's crazy how quickly deception becomes second nature. But I didn't need to overthink it. He was thrilled to hear from me. And when he suggested we meet at a hotel, on his dime, I didn't hesitate. That day, it was incredible. Soon after, the girls started making plans for another Friday night out. But this time, one of us, me, had a completely different destination in mind. Instead of heading to a club, I went to Jake's. Technically, it wasn't his house. It was his grandparents' place, and he was house-sitting for them while they spent the summer in Europe. And let me tell you, it was beautiful. Tree-lined streets, massive homes set far enough apart that no one could keep tabs on their neighbors. The kind of place where privacy wasn't a problem. I drove there myself. No need for a taxi. This way was quicker, easier. Besides, no one would see my car from the street anyway, not with those towering oak trees surrounding every yard. It didn't take long for our meetings to become a regular thing. And before I knew it, something else started creeping in. Feelings. But what was it, really? Was it just the fact that he was young, strong, and knew exactly how to satisfy me? Or was it something more? Was it that he truly desired me? Or was it just the thrill of sneaking around, the excitement of stepping outside the predictable stability of marriage? And what about him? What did Jake see in me? Did he have a thing for older women? Was it my maturity that made me more appealing than the girls his age? Maybe the life experience I carried gave me a kind of confidence, something more grounded than his past relationships. Or was it the fact that I was married? Maybe that made me a safer choice. No strings attached, no expectations of a future beyond stolen moments. I didn't have the answers to any of these questions, and honestly, I didn't need them. It was better not to analyze it too much. Because the truth was simple, the sex was incredible. And really, who was getting hurt? No one. Life with Tyler carried on as usual. The same routines. The same habits. Every Sunday morning, like clockwork, he took care of his usual tasks, filling up the cars, cleaning them out, giving them a good wash. Looking back, I can't help but think about what a bumper year it was for oak trees. Different types of oaks drop their acorns in cycles. Some only let them fall once every 4 years, others every 3, some every 2. And when their cycles align, it creates an overwhelming acorn harvest, piling up ankle-deep in certain yards, depending on how many trees are around. This was one of those years. Now, guess what my husband found in the cowl of his car? You know, that vent-like space at the base of the windshield, right where the wipers are. Hundreds of acorns. Here's the thing, there isn't a single oak tree near that downtown club. Not one. So naturally, he was curious. Where the hell had all those acorns come from? Anyone in town could tell you about that neighborhood. The one with the grand old homes, the stately mansions. A place famous for its towering, mature oak trees. Oak Hollow. I never asked Tyler what he thought about it. And he never asked me. Turns out, there really wasn't much for us to talk about. I'll get back to that later. But I can only imagine what must have been running through Tyler's mind, wondering why my car had been parked in that neighborhood on a night that was supposed to be just a girls' night out. None of my friends lived there. No one we knew did. And if he started connecting the dots, my car, Oak Hollow, a night out with the girls, a suddenly very happy wife, it wouldn't take a genius to see that something wasn't adding up. I'm not great at math, but I'm sure he started doing his own kind of calculations. Patterns either started making sense, or maybe none of it made sense at all. And that was the real problem. I don't know exactly what he was thinking, but I do know what happened a few weeks later. It was another Sunday morning. Another so-called girls' night out the night before, which, by now, had become my excuse for indulging in something else entirely. At the time, I found it amusing. No, not so much. Tyler woke up early, which was unusual, especially considering how late I'd gotten home. Meanwhile, I had slept like a rock, not stirring once. When I finally made my way downstairs, craving coffee more than anything, I found him in the kitchen making scrambled eggs. I sat down at the table, trying to pull myself together, caffeine in hand, despite the fact that just hours ago I'd been, well, doing something very different. Here you go, baby. Made you some scrambled eggs. His voice was calm, maybe too calm. He lifted the pan and scooped the eggs onto my plate. I blinked. My vision was still a little fuzzy, and I couldn't quite tell what was mixed in with them. Bacon? Sausage? I squinted. Looked again. Nope. Acorns. There were acorns in the eggs. Slowly, I lifted my gaze, and there he was, leaning against the counter, arms crossed, a deep frown on his face. His eyes locked onto mine. I waited for him to say something. But he didn't. He just stood there, watching. And in that moment, I didn't need 20 years of marriage to know. This was bad. Really, really bad. If you ever find acorns in your scrambled eggs, something is very wrong. But when you're having an affair, you live in a constant state of paranoia. You tell yourself you're being careful, covering your tracks, doing everything right to keep your secret hidden. But deep down, you're always on edge, always scanning for something you might have missed, some tiny detail that could give you away. And now, acorns in my eggs. My husband standing there, silent, his face unreadable. That was a very bad sign. But he wasn't saying a word. So how was I supposed to handle this? What would you do? I glanced down at the plate, forcing myself to act like this was just another normal morning. "Thanks, honey," I said, picking up my fork. "I don't think I've ever had this combination before." I took a bite, carefully pushing the acorns aside, sneaking quick glances at him between bites. Still nothing. Silence. Then, without a word, Tyler turned and walked into the laundry room, which was right next to the kitchen. A few seconds later, he came back. He dropped a plastic bag onto the table in front of me. Again, nothing. Not a single word. This time, when I looked up, his expression had changed. He wasn't just quiet. He was angry. I hesitated. Should I say something? Ask him what was wrong? Or should I just open the bag? I already knew the answer. He had thrown it in front of me for a reason. But I just sat there. "Dump out the bag," he said, his voice sharp. I swallowed hard, then picked it up and turned it over, spilling the contents onto the table. 5 sets of lingerie. I stared at them, frozen. I had actually been wondering where they'd gone. I thought I'd just misplaced them, maybe left them buried under piles of laundry. But now, here they were. "Smell them," he snapped. I flinched at his sudden outburst but didn't move. I knew exactly what he was trying to prove. And why? I didn't have to pick them up. I already knew what they smelled like. And so did he. He must have been pulling my laundry from a basket every Sunday morning, checking for evidence, searching for any trace of something. Someone that didn't belong. And now he'd found it. Tyler had been searching for proof, hoping deep down that he'd never actually find it. But now he had. The scent of another man on my lingerie was undeniable, and my silence, my refusal to meet his eyes, was as much of a confession as if I had spoken the words out loud. And then the silence shattered. I don't need to tell you how angry he was. The rage, the betrayal, it was all there, unleashed in words that cut deep, words that could never be taken back. That was the moment I knew. Our marriage wasn't just in trouble. It was broken. And the worst part? Almost everything he said was true. I wanted to say I was sorry. I wanted to apologize. But I knew it wouldn't mean anything. The words felt hollow before I even spoke them. So instead, all I managed to whisper was, "It's over." Looking back, that was probably a mistake. I should have let him get it all out, let him yell, let him pour every ounce of fury and hurt onto the table. I should have just sat there, endured it, given him that space to release everything he was feeling. But I didn't. And all I did was make him even angrier. "How do I know it's over?" he snapped. "Am I just supposed to trust you now?" Then, with a bitter laugh, he shook his head. "I'm a financial planner. Tell me, should I invest in this marriage? Because when we took our vows, that was supposed to be the guarantee. And now you're telling me, what? That past performance is no guarantee of future results." That one hurt. But he was right. That's when I decided to just stop talking. I wasn't going to make it worse. He needed space, to grieve, to process, to maybe, somehow, get to a place where forgiveness was even possible. Or at the very least, a place where we could talk instead of just screaming at each other. But it took time. From that moment on, there was no warmth left between us. No tenderness, no compassion. He wasn't cruel, but he didn't need me anymore. He did his own laundry, bought his own groceries, cooked his own meals, cleaned his own car. And for the first time, I truly realized just how much he had done for me. For us. And then, about 2 weeks later, he finally spoke. "I think we should sit down and talk." When Tyler finally said, "We need to sit down and talk," I knew it was coming. I had been preparing for this moment, running through conversations in my head, thinking of all the things I wanted to say. But when it actually happened, I went completely blank. He sat across from me, my husband, the man I had loved for 20 years, still handsome, still composed, but with a weight in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "I've been trying to process this," he started, his voice steady. "Trying to grieve what we lost." I swallowed hard. "Even if I forgive you," he went on, "even if you never cheat again, our relationship will never be the same." Hearing that, I broke down. Over the past 2 weeks, I had been slowly realizing the true cost of what I had done, especially on an emotional level. But hearing him say it out loud, confirming what I had been afraid to admit, it crushed me. Through tears, I whispered, "I was hoping that, with time, you'd forgive me. That maybe we could start over." Tyler didn't hesitate. "I don't think so." His voice was flat, detached. "How do I know you're not still in contact with him?" he asked. "I'm not like that," I said quickly. "I ended it." The word lover hung in the air between us, heavy and painful. It made my stomach turn. I started crying again. He exhaled, shaking his head. "You know, I've thought a lot about forgiving you. I've tried to go back in my mind to what I thought we had. Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe there was something I missed. But whatever the reason was, whatever excuses you might have, what you did, that's on you." I opened my mouth to say something, but he wasn't finished. "I don't know why you did it," he admitted. "But no matter what I did or didn't do, nothing justifies you walking away from me like that." I wiped my face and whispered, "It wasn't you. You're right. This is all on me." He let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Oh, well, thanks for stating the obvious." His voice was colder than I had ever heard it. Then, after a moment, he sighed. "Here's the thing about forgiveness," he said, looking right at me. "If I forgive you, it feels like I'm saying your affair was acceptable. Like it was okay." I shook my head quickly. "It wasn't." But he kept going. "You'll always have those memories," he said. "Those moments of pleasure. Those mornings with your coffee, humming to yourself, feeling satisfied. And you know what? Every time I hear you hum, I'll wonder, are you thinking about him? About the happiness you found in another man's arms?" God, I had never thought about it like that. Never once considered how my actions would poison even the smallest, most ordinary moments for him. And then, he said the thing that hit me the hardest. This took away my ability to make my own choices. "You made that choice for me," Tyler said, his voice steady but sharp. "That's why they call it betrayal." "No, no, baby, you're not like that," I blurted out, desperate to fix what I had broken. "You're a good man. This is my fault. Please don't think that way." But he just shook his head. "That doesn't change the reality." He exhaled slowly, his face unreadable. Then, locking eyes with me, he lifted a single brow, like he had already made his decision. "I'm taking back control," he said. "Of myself. Only myself. You're free to do whatever you want." I knew exactly what he meant. "Tyler, please don't do this," I pleaded. "Just give me a chance." His expression didn't waver. "A chance?" he repeated. "Like the one you gave me?" I opened my mouth, but he didn't give me time to respond. "No," he said flatly. "You took away my choice. You never asked me, never gave me the chance to fight for us. So now I'm taking back my choice." I felt like I was going to be sick. Then, after a pause, his voice dropped lower, quieter, but no less brutal. "I take back what I said before," he admitted. "I'll be honest with you, I just don't want to be around you anymore." I clenched my jaw, swallowing the lump in my throat. "But divorce," he continued, "that's public. That's something everyone will know about. And they'll ask why." My stomach twisted. "So," he went on, "if you really feel remorse, maybe you'll tell them the truth. Because if they ask me—" He let out a short, humorless laugh. "I will." And just like that, 3 months later, I was single again. Half of our savings. A car. An apartment. We sold the house, and yeah, Tyler was fair when it came to splitting our assets. He even agreed to pay me alimony for 2 years, more than I expected, more than I deserved. But what else did I get? A verbal lashing from my parents, the cold judgment of our neighbors, the resentment of my grown children, angry at me for breaking up our family, loneliness, the stress of paying my own bills, the reputation of a reckless woman, the panic of searching for a job. And now, looking back, I think I understand something I couldn't see before. Marriage, even a good one, especially a good one, can start to feel distorted over time. The security, the comfort, the very things that make it stable can, after a while, start to seem like shackles. And maybe, just maybe, all those nights out with the girls, all those little complaints we laughed about, maybe they poisoned something in me. Being divorced made me a target for other men. And in my current state of mind, I knew I was making choices that wouldn't exactly pass the faithful wife test. Now, with all this free time, I find it harder and harder to fill my days. Sure, work keeps me busy. But honestly, it sucks. Life was a lot easier when I didn't have to stress about paychecks or making ends meet. Tyler made good money. And while the divorce settlement was fair, it definitely wasn't enough to live on forever. I wasn't thinking about any of this when I was in bed with Jake. Not once did it cross my mind. For the rest of my life. God, I never even considered what that meant. I had imagined vacations I can't afford now. Lazy mornings with a lifelong partner, someone who had been through everything with me, who knew me better than anyone. Now, that future is gone. How do I even begin to rebuild something like that? Am I supposed to start over from scratch, trying to create that kind of bond with someone new? And then there's Tyler. He's a good-looking man, and with age, he'll only become more refined, more distinguished. Meanwhile, women? Well, we age differently. And dating? Who am I even supposed to date? More importantly, who would ever trust me? What am I supposed to say when someone asks why I'm divorced? Yeah, I cheated. It was my fault. But hey, I've changed. You can trust me now. Who the hell would believe that? And if a guy did believe me, wouldn't that mean he probably had a past just like mine? Would I be able to trust him? Wow. I used to think parts of my life were boring, repetitive, too routine. But looking back, maybe stability wasn't such a bad thing. And now? Now my life is definitely interesting. But I'm not so sure interesting is a good thing. Thanks for listening all the way to the end. Take care of yourself and the people you love. Goodbye.